CBS Network. The Jacks would be the second South Dakota school to win the tournament in 6 years. The USD women won in 2016. Both programs have several notable wins since then. SDSU made it to the Sweet 16 in 2019. The Coyotes did the same this season. Some of the best bull riders in the world are in Sioux Falls this weekend. The PBR Tour returns to the Premier Center tonight through Sunday. Our Ernest Cottier caught up with the riders this morning on Dakota News Now. They tell us Sioux Falls has been a welcoming community and they are ready to put on a show for the whole family.
This is a unique weekend. We've not only got a 3-day performance, so we're Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, but Saturday night we're doing something special. We call it our 15-15, where our 15 top cowboys in the world matched up against the 15 rankest bulls you've ever seen.
Tonight's show begins at 7:45. There are also shows tomorrow evening at 6:45, as well as Sunday afternoon at 1:45. You can find more information on your Dakota News Now app.
3 former Minnesota Vikings coming to Aberdeen. They'll be making an appearance tomorrow at a fundraiser for a lifelong Vikings fan who's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Sarah Parkin with our story now from the Hub City.
Last September, Greg Swanson was getting ready to go to his first ever Vikings away game in Arizona when he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. That's when his friends knew that they needed to do something special for Swanee.
It was tough. I mean, obviously finding out and, having that, never been to a road game before for the Vikings, and that's why I was really excited about that. Then it just didn't work out.
Greg is surrounded by friends he's known since high school. They knew they wanted to create a fundraiser for him.
It's really hard to think about what he's going through, and you want to help in any way you can.
And we talked about doing something for Greg, and really just at that time doing a get-together and maybe a little bit of fundraising, and then next thing you know, some other friends caught wind of it, and here we are.
That small fundraiser has now turned into a 6-hour event that will feature live and silent auctions, a beanbag tournament, and appearances from 3 former Vikings players, including Tommy Kramer.
Reaching out is just a kind of a shot in the dark. One of our guys reached out to him on Twitter and wrote him a nice letter and asked him for donations, and he said, no, I'll one-up that and show up.
Kramer will be joined by former Vikings linebacker Ed McDaniel and Ted Brown. Although Greg isn't a fan of being in the spotlight, his friends knew the support for him would be overwhelming.
Greg never asked for any of this. When we started all this, he didn't want any social media. He didn't want any. He just kind of wanted to have it low key. And Greg's just that guy where you weren't going to be able to keep it low key.
It's just the generosity and overwhelming support that they've given me just can't be matched.
The Skull for Swanee fundraiser will take place tomorrow from 2 to 8 p.m. at the Zoo Bar. In Aberdeen, Sarah Parkin, Dakota News Now.
And if you're not able to make it to tomorrow's fundraiser, Greg's friends have a GoFundMe page set up for him. We have a link to that page with this story at dakotanewsnow.com. Thank you for being with us here at 5 o'clock. Coming up, a potential step closer to legalizing marijuana at the federal level. We'll look at this latest effort and what might come next. Hi, Phil.
Hey, we've got a nice start to the weekend in our forecast. No fooling on this April Fool's Day, but then things change on Sunday, and maybe that's nice for you too because we have some more precip coming our way. Details coming up around 5:15.
Phil, thank you. Sunday's Oscar slap is still being talked about nearly 1 week later. Now the show's producer is speaking out for the first time. That's still ahead on Dakota News Now at 5.
The I-Team digs deeper into local and national
carboxyzone.
Here's what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki just told me.
This is a war of aggression by the Russian leadership, by President Putin, that has left millions of people displaced, homeless, has targeted civilians, hospitals, and other innocent people across Ukraine. We know who the aggressor is. That is President Putin and Russia. And beyond that, I don't have any comment on military tactics.
This, of course, comes, Wolf, as the U.S. has been saying recently that they believe Putin is being misinformed by his advisors, that he is self-isolated, that he might even be punishing some of his advisors. It's notable, though, Wolf, that the U.S. is clearly not wanting to comment on potential Ukrainian counter and not wanting to weigh in or take any actions that might be perceived by the Russians as being escalatory, Wolf.
On a separate matter, MJ, as you know, the unemployment rate dropping to a new pandemic low here in the United States, but there are still some very serious economic issues facing Americans, as we all know, including gas prices and inflation.
That's absolutely right, though President Biden understandably wanted to make sure that he took this opportunity to celebrate some of the positive headlines that we saw from today's jobs report. 431,000 jobs created in the month of March. The past 2 months, jobs reports were revised up by some 95,000 jobs. The unemployment rate now stands at 3.6%. What all of this means is that the jobs that were lost during the pandemic, most of them have been recovered, and that's why we heard the president saying today that the economy has gone from, quote, being on the mend to being on the move. But you are absolutely right that this administration still facing some very serious concerns, particularly when it comes to inflation, high gas prices, and even though wages are going up, that can in turn fuel the concerns about inflation continuing to be a serious problem for this administration. This is, of course, why we saw this week the administration announcing the release of up to 180 million barrels of extra oil. This is one of the actions that the administration is taking to try to drive some of the prices down. Of course, they know that there is no simple overnight fix for all of these concerns. Wolf.
I'm Jay Lee at the White House. Thanks very much. There's more breaking news just ahead. I'll ask the former Ukrainian Prime Minister if this country was behind that fuel depot strike on Russian soil. He's standing by to join us live. That's next. Also, we're going live to southern Ukraine for the latest on the safe arrival of an evacuation convoy from the devastated city of Mariupol.
See, son?
Percent of students reported feeling persistently sad and hopeless. 66% said they found it more difficult to complete their schoolwork. Many also reporting economic instability. 1 in 4 experiencing hunger. 29% said one of their parents lost a job during the pandemic. And Nicole, the study also put a magnifying glass on abuse during this time, with more than half, 55% experiencing emotional abuse from a parent during the pandemic, and more than 1 in 10 saying they had been physically abused. And when it comes to LGBTQ students, Nicole, those numbers only got higher.
All right, so Marky, what's the message here to students and parents who are really just trying to navigate these hard times and so many emotions?
Yeah, so this study also outlines some solutions too. Maybe one of the biggest ones being, students who felt a sense of being cared for, connectedness to an adult or a parent, felt like they belonged at school. They were less likely to report that they felt lonely or isolated. I also talked to a parental advocate earlier this afternoon. She said, communication is key. You got to talk to your kids, get them talking at the dinner table before they go to sleep. If you notice them isolating, pull them away from screen time. See how that helps. And lastly, Nicole, I did also talk to a psychologist earlier this afternoon. She said the one group seeming to be more affected than any other that she is witnessing, sophomores, both high school and college. That's the group that didn't get a graduation. Their freshman year was isolated. So now they're finishing out their sophomore year and they still feel like freshmen. But yeah, Nicole, this CDC report, extremely illuminating.
Yes, it certainly is. Really so important to check on people, even the people that seem like they're okay. Marky, thank you for that. Yeah. Well, I do want to get to some breaking news. Ghislaine Maxwell will not get a new trial. Today, a New York federal judge rejecting Maxwell's request for a new trial. At issue, a juror who did not disclose that he had been sexually abused as a child. Now, before the trial, prospective jurors were asked whether they had ever been a victim of sexual abuse, but that juror did not reveal his past abuse. The judge today calling the move highly unfortunate but not deliberate. Maxwell was convicted of conspiring to recruit and groom teenage girls to have sex with her companion, the late Jeffrey Epstein. Still ahead on NewsNation Rush Hour, will the president's plan to release reserve oil barrels really bring those gas prices down? Or is it all just political grandstanding ahead of the midterms? NewsNation pressing lawmakers on what options are still on the table. We'll take you live to Capitol Hill next. And the White House press secretary has plans to move on. Where she's heading, we'll tell you later on Rush Hour.
been dismissed.
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 Cable news. Give me something to defend my country with, my state. And if you want it, and I believe that the United States, the people of the United States want that, but if this process gets longer, continues to be delayed, if we can see that the process of transferring those weapons is getting slower, then people begin to ask the question, is it really true? Maybe there is some game behind it. I don't want to believe that some partners of ours are playing games. I don't know if President Biden is fearing President Putin. I believe that he doesn't. I want to believe that he doesn't, because he's the leader of a big nation, a great nation. I'm holding my fist. That's our tradition. I don't know if you understand this this standard. I hold my fists or cross my fingers so that this will never happen, that any president of the United States would fear Russia, because America for us was always a symbol of democracy, and I have faith that Ukraine is also now, for Ukraine, you're also a symbol of freedom.
Did you order the attack into Russian soil, the Ukrainian helicopter attack on a Russian military depot across from Kharkiv, across the border in Russia?
I'm sorry, I do not discuss any of my orders as Commander-in-Chief, the leader of this state, and there are things which I only share with the military armed forces of Ukraine and when they talk with me. You need to understand that on that territory that you mentioned, you have to know they were placing their shooting systems and firing those missiles themselves. And I know in some regions this path to Mariupol, we had made a deal with the Russian Federation to open that corridor. They went, people went, but then the Russians shot at them, and they said, no, we didn't shoot, but they controlled 140 kilometers of that road. Our forces were not there, and they shot many of those convoys, and Russians were saying, we ordered not to shoot. So, in those temporarily occupied territories, there are all kinds of things happening which do not balance. The military do looting, marauding. It's not just Russian soldiers. We know that there are some Wagner group fighters, and there are Chechnya fighters, Chechnya guards, and some Syrians, all kinds of fighters there. So what's happening there? The Russians might not even know fully what happens there. What matters for us is that you and the whole world should know that we are a country at war. We were attacked. That is what matters. That is the biggest tragedy. But honestly, it's not professional to talk about it. They occupied our territory. They attacked us. It's been this war been going on for 8 years. So whatever happens in a certain situation, it's hard for me to comment.
Well, Vladimir Putin's
figure.
The bedrock of Putin's Nazi-style policy. Okay, that's weird. To celebrate victory against Nazis with the Nazi approach and with the Nazi policy that have been implemented by Putin. So I believe that we are to face very complex and difficult months. He started to regroup his military, to redeploy his military. Ukrainian military already launched a counteroffensive in a number of areas, mainly in the suburbs of Kyiv. But what we see on the ground is that this kind of redeployment will maybe give him a chance to take over a small chunk of the territory in the east of Ukraine. But I want to be very clear. We will never give any inch of Ukrainian territory to this aggressor. And that's the reason why we ask you, I mean the United States and the G7 and the entire free world, to help Ukraine to win this fight.
Thank you so much for joining us, the Ukrainian former Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Appreciate it very much. We will stay in close touch with you. Coming up, a dangerous and very emotional journey as thousands of Ukrainian civilians escape the horrors in Mariupol. CNN was on the ground as the buses rolled in. You'll want to see them.
You need health insurance, putting you one step ahead of eczema.
In order to be able to help our people. Those people are waiting for our help. We don't care about the tactics of Russian Federation. We will gladly accept such a ceasefire in order to help our people. That's number one. Number two, the strategy of taking Ukraine in 3 days or 5 days, this is already a matter of the past. Let's not forget that it failed, and we will stand defending us, and we will be the first ones among those who want to finish the war diplomatically, and we will always support it. From the beginning, we were speaking in favor of peace, but we are fighting on our territory. But everybody must know that if we are pressed in a corner on our territory, we will respond the way we can in order to save as many our lives as we can. We will answer at full strength.
And what's your final message for Vladimir Putin?
I wish him to watch television that is not Russian, to see what really is happening in the world.
We will have more with President Zelensky and his message in English to Americans who are watching as the war in Ukraine unfolds.
It's not only Russian-Ukrainian war or war for our independence. I believe it will not be, but it's a world war. I don't believe that we'll lose.
If measurable, minuscule, and certainly fleeting. Here's why. Nicole, energy markets are global, very complicated, and notoriously volatile. So sorting out the effect of a minor movement, such as the president is proposing, is very difficult. When I say a minor movement, people are saying, no doubt, well, 1 million barrels of oil a day, gosh, that's a lot. Well, it's actually not. 1 million barrels of oil a day is what the American people use. 1 million barrels is what the American people use not every 73 days, not every 73 hours, but every 73 minutes. So this is a fairly small tweaking of an enormous American appetite for oil.
All right, well, George, it appears that a lot of lawmakers agree with exactly what you're saying. They were saying the president's plan will not work. So what are some options that will? What is still on the table here? And will those options do anything to help Americans who are right now really struggling with these high gas prices?
Well, the only short-term thing that can be done is to hope that other nations also run down a bit their reserves and that this has a global effect. That's very hard to do. Long-term, what we need, and what the president knows we need and has said that we need, is major production. The problem is that the Biden administration has been constantly saying that fossil fuel use poses an existential threat to the country. Now, that's a big word, and what it means is, the only clear meaning is, that unless we wean ourselves off fossil fuels in a way, there's a threat to the existence of life on this planet. So on the one hand, you have this rhetorical dissonance, the warnings of the most dire sort, combined with the most urgent desire to increase fossil fuel consumption. In Chicago, where you are, the city is planning to issue cards redeemable for gasoline to be distributed by lottery to a fortunate few who will get these cards worth $150 worth of gas.
Well, so George, this is a pretty bleak outlook here. You know, if there's really nothing that can be done in Congress that's going to make a negligible difference at this point, why are the lawmakers who say it will work, why are they making such a big deal out of this, which is, you know, basically ineffective solutions? Is this really all about political grandstanding? Because, of course, the midterms are ahead of us.
It's an old axiom, don't just stand there, do something, and this is something you can do immediately. That is, you can have a press release and a press conference. It's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for a reason. It's to protect the United States from serious global strategic problems. It should be called the Politically Tactical Petroleum Reserve because presidents of both parties, equally guilty, have used this as a gesture to convince the public that they're doing something when there really is not much they can do in the short term.
All right, NewsNation senior contributor George
broken the glass on what people thought was impossible.
But I can tell you what, Amazon doesn't become Amazon without the people. And we make Amazon what it is.
How did these organizers pull off such a historic win? Well, guess who's here? The president of the Amazon Labor Union is our special guest, Christian Smalls, who's busy running around today but made some time for us, and the former Secretary of Labor in the United States, Robert Reich. We're back in 1 minute.
Is afraid of sanctions. It puts them out of comfort. It drops down their economy. But there's a question of how sanctions are working. We are showing and telling the United States and European leaders everybody must work together and quickly. They must have an impact on the oligarchs, on the president of Russia, and on all the parties and on the country in general. The United States should continue working on this. If the U.S. would like to have successful negotiations at the negotiation table with Ukraine, the nations of Europe and the world must feel that America is strong and the sanctions must be appropriately strong. If Ukraine is gone tomorrow, there will be a food crisis in the world. I was saying there will be an artificial deficit of energy resources due to Nord Stream 2. So the sanctions need to be pressed further. U.S. congressmen, senators, everybody must keep pressing, and they must show that if you want to say that you're the leaders of this civilization, keep being that. Don't lose this initiative.
Are you seeing evidence that China is helping Russia militarily? Clearly China is helping economically, so is India, perhaps other countries. Do you have a message about that?
I would like the Chinese People's Republic to be on our side, but nevertheless it'll be their choice. Who can make an influence? Who can impact this? Like, I think without direct talks, direct communication between the U.S. and the Chinese People's Republic, it will not be possible, it will be difficult to achieve the result that the world needs.
A couple of quick things, if I could, Mr. President. Reports are this morning that you fired 2 senior members of your national security team, and you're quoted as a report saying, "I do not have time to deal with all the traitors, but they will gradually be punished." Is that true, and can you tell us the circumstances of that?
Yes. I stripped them of their ranks. One person was fired sometime earlier, and today he was stripped of his general rank. Another person was expelled in our secret service for the reasons that one of them is not inside this country right now, and the other one was not at work and was someplace else inside Ukraine at the time when the city was being occupied, his city was being occupied by Russians. So I believe this was wrong, and now I want our law enforcement to examine this further.
Do you know how many assassination attempts you've survived?
Things are very complicated.
Been so.
There are things which is difficult for me to count. My intelligence says there were such attempts, and we saw information about some arrivals, planes. There were other details, but listen, I'm alive, I'm not wounded, I'm intact. So it's hard for me to talk about this. So many people have died in our country.
I want to have you clear something up for us.
The number of refugees, Ukrainian refugees, who have left the country has surpassed 4 million people. How much worse could that number get if the Russian invasion continues?
Well, you've got to remember one thing, is that there's indeed, for us, 2 million children who have actually left the country, but for those 2 million children who have left the country, there are 2.5 million who have been displaced within the country.
The 3 kids are sucked into cyberspace.
Everything from all the components of those volunteer battalions later were incorporated into the military of Ukraine. Those Azov fighters are no longer self-established group. They are a component of the Ukrainian military. Back in 2014, there were situations when our volunteers were encircled, and some of them did violate.
Simone Sanders was hired by the network in January, and Zaki would join a long list of press secretaries from both parties to make the jump from public service into the world of television. NewsNation's Kelly Beeson is joining us here live. So Kelly, is this a revolving door that at this point is just speeding up?
Well, Nicole, while it certainly does feel like we see press secretaries make these jumps frequently, the trend actually has been pretty steady since the early 90s. Since the Clinton administration, multiple press secretaries have served under each president, with many making the transition to other high-profile positions in media.
Hi, everyone. There's a lot of pink in this room today. Zeke and Mary are going to the prom together.
She's the communications arm of the White House.
You guys are pushing electric vehicles today. This is a president who always talks about the power of our example. Does he own an electric vehicle?
Presidents of the United States don't do a lot of driving.
With spunk. And the country is divided over Jen Psaki's performance as press secretary.
Jen Psaki is someone, it seems like political watchers either love her or they hate her. These people, when they're press secretaries, they sort of develop their own personas, and then that can translate into getting a TV deal.
That appears to be the case for Psaki, who's reportedly working to leave her post for MSNBC. However, no formal announcements have been made.
I think it sort of seems like a natural next step.
From the Clinton through Trump administrations, more than 15 press secretaries have taken the podium, many making the shift to other highly visible positions. George Stephanopoulos hosting GMA, Sean Spicer Dancing with the Stars, Sarah Sanders running for governor of Arkansas, and Kayleigh McEnany and Dana Perino on Fox News. But do these moves muddy the waters when it comes to public trust?
It absolutely is a fine line.
Julia Manchester is a national political reporter at The Hill who says the answer depends.
We had hundreds of people write in on social media, and a lot of questions dealt with you, how you're holding up, how is your family. They wanted to feel you personally, how you are getting through this war, and how your family is doing.
I'm okay. I'm do what I can, and each morning I'm thinking that I don't do enough, and that is the biggest problem for me. But that's good that I don't have so much free time to think about all this, all these things. I don't have any time to think about me, and it's a pity that I don't have time to think about, spending time with my family. That is the problem, because that is the love of my life. That is that thing that I want, I love, that I have, the main things I have. And that's why I think we fight, all our Ukrainians, because we saw a lot of things. We want our children to be with open eyes and to see it.
Last thing, you were elected at 41, younger than any of our presidents here in the U.S. 3 years ago, you were starring in a Ukrainian sitcom. You had a successful career as a comedian and an actor. You were even on the Dancing with the Stars Ukrainian version. But now you're being described around the world as this Churchillian figure, standing firm against Russia. Short of experiencing war, could you ever anticipate the intensity of focus, the purpose that this war demands of you, and where you are right now?
God chooses what we can endure, and I think this was not by chance. I know that we will stand through this, and my partners today are the people of Ukraine, and I am now working 24/7, and I fulfill my work as much as I can efficiently.
Mr. President, we appreciate your time on behalf of Special Report and Fox News.
Thank you so much. It was a great honor.
Our thanks to President Zelensky, his team, our thanks to my team for turning that around. It was a tough edit today. Up next, the panel with reaction to what we have heard from...
Secretary mentioned it's significant. My last question for you is the least important question. Will you tell us what type of champagne it was?
Whatever my organizer hand, you know, it was for them. You know, I wasn't expecting that, but
somebody just handed it to you.
It tasted very good. Whatever it was sweet victory.
Hey, as mentioned, when David beats Goliath, I think a lot of people are inspired by that. As I said here, people make up their own minds about it. We're talking about whether they have a fair process, and we wanted to hear from you directly so you could put your experience on the record. Christian Smalls, thank you. Robert Reich, thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. We are going to fit in a break. We have new heat on Governor DeSantis, and Harvey Fierstein, the legend, is here. We're going to get into all of it tonight.
Power E-Trade gives you an award-winning mobile app with powerful, easy-to-use tools and...
Notice this morning at about 5:43 in the morning.
Deadly weapons, a field carpeted with anti-tank mines, and an RPG warhead in the front yard of this home.
So this is a Russian rocket?
Russian rocket, да.
Vladimir Putin sent his soldiers to invade a country that wants to be free, and his war is killing both Ukrainians and Russians.
Russian troops who were occupying the Chernobyl nuclear site have now withdrawn, according to Ukrainian officials. And they claim the Russian soldiers received significant doses of radiation because they dug trenches in the exclusion zone around the plant. Major.
Holly Williams, thank you. Since the start of the war, no target appears to be off limits to Russian fire, including dozens of medical facilities. Today, a Russian shell struck an oncology ward in Chernihiv, injuring 3 people. On this Sunday's 60 Minutes, CBS's Scott Pelley reports on an American nonprofit delivering medical supplies and training.
In Ukraine today, hope must be imported. We found it in an abandoned factory where an American charity, the International Medical Corps, is distributing medical supplies.
Part of something that Chris and Will were doing on their own. I thought it was a bit. I thought it was a bit like everybody else. I knew we hadn't practiced it.
Not concerned.
I wasn't concerned at all.
As he's walking.
I figured, okay, you know, he's going to say something or come at him. Something funny is going to happen because that's the nature of Chris and that's the nature of Will. So let's see what happens.
Oh! What actually happened, he told our TJ Holmes, was no joke.
Oh, wow! Wow! Will Smith just smacked the out of me.
That now infamous moment coming after an unscripted joke about Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right?
Pinkett Smith has been open about her battle with alopecia. A longtime friend of Chris Rock's said he did not know about the condition. After that slap, Will Smith's reaction...
Keep my wife's name out your mouth! I'm going to, okay?
Brought reality crashing in.
Once I saw Will yelling at the stage with such vitriol, my heart dropped. And I just remember thinking, oh no, not like this. And Chris was keeping his head when everybody else was losing theirs.
That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
And even then, says Packer, he needed to verify that what he and millions of others had just seen was real.
I said, did he really hit you? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. He goes, I just took a punch from Muhammad Ali, as only Chris can. He was immediately, you know, in joke mode, but you could tell that he was very much still in shock. And he was telling me, I'm fine. Let's just get past this. I'm getting out of here. I can't believe this happened.
The LAPD already on the scene for security, then speaking to Chris Rock in Packer's office.
They were saying, this is battery. We will go get him. We are prepared. We're prepared to get him right now. You can press charges. We can arrest him. As they were talking, Chris was, he was being very dismissive of those options. He was like, no, I'm fine. He was like, no.
The Academy says Will Smith was asked to leave, but that he refused. But once there was no arrest, it would have been the Academy's decision to physically remove Smith.
A lot of folks immediately wondered why he got up, walked that far, assaulted somebody, went back to his seat and was allowed to stay.
Right.
What was the conversation behind the scenes?
Shayla told me that they were about to physically remove Will Smith. And I had not been a part of those conversations.
Packer says he didn't speak directly to Will Smith that night, but he did talk to his publicist.
I said to the publicist, the Academy is not going to remove him. And she looked at me and said, thank God.
As for Chris Rock, Packer says he helped everyone make it through the rest of the night.
Because Chris handled the moment with such grace and aplomb, it allowed the show to continue.
Chris Rock saved the Oscars that night? Did he save the show that night?
I think he did. I think he did. He certainly saved what was left of it at that point.
So he says Chris Rock saved the show. Matt Gutman joining us now. Matt, the question, though, has Will Packer talked to Will Smith?
Apparently he did. Packer says that Will Smith reached out the very next morning apologizing and expressing his embarrassment over the incident. Of course, Will Smith also apologizing to Chris Rock, posting on Instagram that he was out of line and that he was wrong. And which is moments ago, for the first time since Packer made these comments, we heard from a source from the Academy saying that Packer does not speak for the Academy. Whit.
All right, Matt, with those new developments, thank you. Next tonight, your money. The rising prices affecting every American family. Inflation at its highest level in 40 years, and wages aren't keeping up. Food
situation worse.
How was your weekend?
Rock was back to doing stand-up this week, telling fans in Boston that he is still processing what happened. Packer credits Chris Rock for saving the Oscars.
Chris handled the moment with such grace and aplomb, it allowed the show to continue.
Now, Smith reportedly apologized to Academy leaders on a Zoom call. However, he is still facing disciplinary actions that could include expulsions or suspensions from the Academy. Major.
And the conversations continue. Jerika Duncan, thank you so much. When it comes to presidents, few can speak truth to power more than members of the family. Nora O'Donnell sat down with the first sister, Valerie Biden Owens, to talk about her family story of tragedy, resilience, and purpose.
You're one of the few people that is not afraid to tell your brother when he's made a mistake. Yes. Have you had to tell him anything lately where he's wrong?
No.
None of us are perfect.
None
of us are
perfect. Sometimes it's the tone or the flipness of a remark. And I'll say, that's a little harsh. What happens to Joe, and Joe goes on for a lengthy explanation, and you can see the other people like, I want to kick him, Joe, stop talking. But he is so focused on answering the question that sometimes other people don't get a chance to jump in or to end a speech because they got one more thing to say. And here's one more fact. And people are interested, but sometimes it's just time to stop.
So you tell him to be less loquacious?
On occasions, yes. Yes, that has happened on occasions.
His off-script remark that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. Some called it a gaffe. Some people called it the unvarnished truth. What did you make of when he said it?
First of all, when anybody says Joe's a gap is he speaks the truth. Joe had just come from spending the afternoon with moms and their children that have been families destroyed by what's happening in the Ukraine. That's Joe. He knows what grief and that pain is.
So when you heard people say, well, he's going to walk it back, you thought?
No. He spoke as a father. He's real. The private man is the public person. There's no daylight.
You can watch more of Nora's interview with Valerie Biden-Owens this weekend on CBS Sunday Morning. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, one of the toughest sentences yet stemming from the attack on the U.S. Capitol. U.S. Census data from 1950 is released online, providing a vivid snapshot of post-war America. And the U.S. men's soccer team draws its first opponent in the World Cup tournament, and it's a familiar foe.
The new skillet
burger with "Oh, hello, hello." McCarthy telling reporters Cawthorn did not tell the truth.
He claims he watched people do cocaine. No, then when he comes to tell me, he says, no, he thinks he saw maybe a staffer in a parking garage from 100 yards away. And tell me that he doesn't know what cocaine is. It's just frustrating.
Sources say the Republican leader asked Cawthorn to publicly apologize, but so far Cawthorn has refused. His Republican colleagues infuriated. What did you make of those comments?
Well, irresponsible. Irresponsible.
What he's saying can't possibly be true. I just think it puts us in bad light.
Both of North Carolina's Republican senators say they will not back Cawthorn in his upcoming primary, calling him an embarrassment, saying he lacks the most basic standards of a congressman, but he still has one big name in his corner, and that is Donald Trump, who announced today that Cawthorn will be a guest at his rally in North Carolina.
Rachel Scott on Capitol Hill, thank you. The CDC today announcing it's ending a Trump-era policy that limited asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border to prevent the spread of COVID-19. With COVID cases dropping, the policy known as Title 42 will now end May 23rd. Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas says the administration is ready with more staff, more resources, and more vaccines. DHS says they are currently seeing some 7,000 migrants every day, but after Title 42 expires, that number could climb to 18,000 per day. And a major victory for organized labor tonight, Amazon workers at a facility on Staten Island have voted to form a union. After the results, organizers popped the cork on a bottle of champagne. Amazon is the nation's second largest private employer, and the Staten Island Fulfillment Center is its first in the U.S. to unionize. The company said they are disappointed and they may file objections. When we come back here tonight, former U.S. soccer star Hope Solo arrested, accused of alleged drunk driving, resisting arrest, and child endangerment.
If you have advanced non-small cell lung cancer, your first treatment could be a chemo-free combination of 2 immunotherapies that works differently. It could mean a chance to live longer. Opdivo plus Yervoy is for adults newly diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer that is spread, tests positive for PD-L1, and does not have an abnormal EGFR or ALK gene. Together, Opdivo plus Yervoy helps your immune system launch a response that fights cancer in 2 different ways. Opdivo plus Yervoy equals a chance for more time together, more family time, more time to remember. Opdivo and Yervoy can cause your immune system to harm healthy parts of your body during and after treatment. These problems can be severe and lead to death. See your doctor right away if you have a cough, chest pain, shortness of breath, irregular heartbeat, diarrhea, constipation, severe stomach pain, nausea or vomiting, dizziness, fainting, eye problems, extreme tiredness, changes in appetite, thirst or urine, rash, itching, confusion, memory problems, muscle pain or weakness, joint pain, flushing or fever. These are not all the possible side effects. Problems can occur together and more often when Opdivo is used with Yervoy. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions, including immune or nervous system problems, if you've had or plan to have an organ or stem cell transplant or received chest radiation. Here's to a chance to live longer. Ask your doctor about the combination of 2 immunotherapies, Opdivo plus Yervoy. Thank you to all those in our clinical trials.
This is a hero walking his youngest down the aisle, which to his bladder feels like a mile. Yet he stands strong, dry, keeping the leaks only to his eyes. Depend. The only thing stronger than us is you.
Next tonight, former U.S. soccer star Hope Solo arrested in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She's accused of driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, and child abuse. Police say her 2-year-old twins were in the car with her when she was pulled over. Her lawyer saying, quote, "The story is more sympathetic than the initial charges suggest." She won 2 Olympic gold medals and the World Cup with the U.S. women's national team. When we come back, America's oldest national park ranger finally retires at the age of 100.
I started screening for colon cancer because of my late husband, Jay.
Weed have made it nearly impossible to run a business safely, and that's why they're getting targeted so much here in Washington State, for example, with really violent criminals, including one just the other week, shot and killed someone. Why do they get targeted? Because they can't do any business with banks. So I think that that needs to be fixed. However, if people think that just suddenly legalizing marijuana means you're taking it off the streets or getting it out of the hands of kids, we know based on the data here in Washington State that just isn't the case. So we just have to be careful as to why people are doing it. Ultimately, I do think that voters should get to decide on their own.
Now, along party lines, though, you know, Republicans are opposing this in general. So, Robbie, do you think it's time to legalize it? Yes or no?
Absolutely. I would legalize marijuana. I would actually legalize all drugs, even drugs that are far more harmful, and actually people do overdose on them. But marijuana should be an easy one. Where is the bodies we can lay, you know, on the altar of marijuana? There are none. It's not particularly addictive. You know, it doesn't cause people to overdose. It's insane that this product that tons of people, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, use safely and have for years, is still illegal. Crazy. We should have again, in my view, a different approach to all drug issues. Let's treat it not as a criminal issue, but as a dependency issue for people who have a problem with it. But that's a harder conversation than marijuana. Yes, legalize it now.
And I'm giving the most vocal person on this panel probably the least amount of time. But before we go to break,
that's okay.
Ashley, what do you think?
You know what I'm going to say already, girl. Well, I'm with Robbie kind of up until like legalizing meth, but I say, yeah, it should be legalized because, like he said, there's exactly 0 overdose deaths on the record, and that's from the DEA, pretty good source. And I also think it's time to tax the HE double hockey stick out of marijuana because we did that to cigarette users, and we had a lot of state money. So yeah, legalize it, tax it, get it out of the gutter, and stop allowing, you know, bronfmans to be minted all the time dealing on the streets.
All right, when you said the sky-high taxes, I saw Jason's head start shaking, but we'll have to continue that discussion at another time. This discussion continues after the break. We're going to have to get our roundtable's picks. Of course, the final 4 kicks off this week, and we'll have them when we come back.
This is News Nation. News for New York, news for all America.
My name is Austin James. As a musician living with diabetes, finger sticks can be a real challenge. That's why I use the Freestyle Libre 2 system. With a painless 1-second scan, I know my glucose numbers without finger sticks. Now I'm managing my diabetes better, and I've lowered my A1C from 8.2 to 6.7.
Take the mystery out of managing your diabetes and lower your A1C. Now,
the injury where she was only attempting a little over 5 field goals a game. That's something that Gino noted as well. If you're Tara Vanderveer, coach,
putting resources.
Title 42 policy, we are nowhere near prepared to deal with that influx. We got the announcement today, though, Ben. It's happening.
It is happening, and the people who should be most worried about it are the 2 senators from Arizona, in particular, Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema. This is something that they've been warning the administration about, to not do this. Unfortunately, it's happening, and we're going to see the ramifications.
Do you think, Matthew, that immigration goes up the chain as important issues as we head towards November?
I think so. It's already where we saw Biden's erosion last spring when the crisis began as a result of him reversing the Trump policies on the border. Biden needs a change in attitude on the border, on energy, and on defense.
But it doesn't seem like a change is coming, does it, Juan?
Well, we're going to see what happens with immigration. Not going to sit still. But in terms of inflation and energy, I think he is taking steps. He's trying to deal with the supply chain, trying to right now consider, you know, even a tax holiday on gas.
It's good to have you guys back in studio.
I'm telling you.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
All right, up next, notable quotables right after this.
Yeah, you have such a way about you. I will tell you, Harvey, I don't think you know this on a personal note. The very first time I saw you perform was your version of Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. And it wasn't until then, I didn't even know you were Jewish.
With a name like Fire, Steve.
I'm kidding. I knew. You know what? You know what, Harvey? I had a hunch. I'm going to give you the final question, which is, in a sentence, if someone just listened to all this and says, okay, but you know what? They say they're still old-fashioned, and this all seems like it's going against their view of nature and tradition. What do you say to them?
If you make those kind of judgments about people, you'll never know the people in your life. Because you're surrounded by all kinds of people. They're just there. My childhood, we grew up. I'm much older than you, of course. Look how young and cute you are. We grew up with this brotherhood idea that we're all the same and we all hold hands, you know, and it's not true. We're all completely different. We're all magnificently unique. And why don't we appreciate each other for that? Why can't I say, I love you for your uniqueness. Please love me for my uniqueness.
Harvey Fierstein, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me, Ari. You know I adore you. Keep telling the truth.
Happy to be adored. He is adorable, if I may say so, the great Harvey Fierstein. That's excerpts from the interview that we recorded here amidst this busy news time. And the full interview, if you search Harvey and Melber, type in Harvey and Melber to YouTube, you can watch the full, unedited interview. We like to share those things with you, and we'll be right back.
I absolutely hate it.
I think we need more heroes. We need you.
Precipitation slowly coming to an end tonight, although there's a chance for a few rumbles of thunder in north-central South Dakota tonight. No worries, no severe weather this evening whatsoever. Clouds will slowly clear out overnight, and there may be some patchy fog between Brookings and Watertown tomorrow morning, but that'll be lifting quick and we'll see sunshine all day tomorrow. Then another round of a rain-snow mix will make its way throughout the day on Sunday. Temperatures as a result will be a little bit cooler, and in extreme northeastern South Dakota, we'll see some very minor snowfall accumulations. That looks to be gone on Monday. We'll see sunshine and warm up again, only to have more rain and, yes, another chance for some snow accumulations on Wednesday once more.
Thank you, Tyler. NBC Nightly News is coming up next.
Dakota News Now continues in 2 minutes. We will see you at 6 o'clock over on KSFY. Have a terrific night and weekend, everyone.
It's slam dunk time again.
Posting the letters at their shelter.
Put a lot of faith into my producer telling me, hopefully not a lie, that it's the last time he's playing in or he's coaching in a tournament. So
That
I'll go
is
ahead
true.
And go
That
with
is
that.
true. That is
There you
also
go.
the team.
Thank you for not
that
lying to me,
have
producer.
Your producer did not lie to you. All right, so we saved the ladies for last here. Crystal and Ashley, I know you both are huge basketball fans. That's what I'm told, right? Or maybe not. No, I know. Even if you don't know anything about basketball, though, that's the great thing about March Madness. Crystal, who do you think is going to win?
I think Villanova. I just think that they have a history of having a good basketball squad, and so I think they're going to go all the way.
All right, and Ashley, what do you think?
I'm Canadian, so I'll just say the Winnipeg Jets. And the reason, I can't believe you even asked me on this panel, but for all the bracket folks out there who are so depressed, if you just flipped a coin, I learned this when I came to the United States, if you just flipped a coin, you would have a 1 in 9.2 quintillion chance of having a perfect bracket. That's when I decided March Madness wasn't for me.
Okay, well, so the last question for everyone. Is March Madness America's greatest sporting event? Ashley, I believe you may have just weighed in on this. So we don't need to hear from our most vocal. Robbie, what do you think? Is this the greatest sporting event in our country?
It might be the most, it goes on for a longer period of time if we're counting all the games. You know, it's fun, even if people don't know much about it, to talk about it. So I'd say, yeah, probably the Super Bowl is actually the single greatest American sports thing, right?
I know, that's why
I also like golf personally, but I'm very weird.
Looking forward to the Masters, I would assume.
Yes.
All right, Crystal, what do you think? Is this the greatest? Is this one that, you don't really have to know much about to get into?
No, I actually think the NBA Finals is one of the greatest sporting events, and Major League Baseball. That's a series that goes on for a while as well. So I'm going to go with NBA Finals and Major League Baseball.
All right, and Jason, of course, we cannot forget about you, sir. What do you think? Is this the greatest? Is this the greatest American sporting event?
It's not. I'm going to go with the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup, which is the longest-running national soccer tournament that no one on this panel has heard of, so I'll go with the Super Bowl.
You know, I have to say I'm impressed.
And why did nobody say Stanley Cup? What is wrong?
I know. I guess we have no hockey fans here. No hockey fans here. Ouch. All right. Well, listen, Ashley, Crystal, Jason, Robbie, thank you all for being part of our roundtable this Friday. We appreciate it. And of course, we do have to.
You around at the best prices, perfect for every home update. Living room, we've got it. Bedroom, covered. Dining room, prepped and waiting. Find exactly what you're looking for with our huge selection of furniture, mattresses, decor, and more. Looking for big style and bigger savings? Stop on in today. Shop guaranteed lowest prices at Unclaimed Freight Furniture.
Investigate TV tackles the top topics. When your health is compromised, we investigate. Corporate greed exposed. The powerful held accountable with in-depth journalism led by award-winning journalist Lee Zurich. Download Investigate TV for your Roku and Amazon Fire devices.
Tonight, a major first on the battlefield of the Russia-Ukraine war as the two sides meet for a new round of talks. A senior U.S. defense official saying Ukrainian helicopters struck a fuel depot inside Russia. It's believed to be the first known attack on Russian soil since the conflict began, though Ukraine is not confirming or denying it. In Mariupol, another attempt at a massive evacuation, largely failing. And the new images coming in, Russia's utter devastation of Kharkiv. Also tonight, tracking the new severe weather threat on the heels of those deadly tornado outbreaks. President Biden celebrating a strong March jobs report, but record inflation taking a bite out of wages. Amazon workers voting to form the first union in the company's history in the U.S. A major blow for Amazon after fiercely fighting against it. The Oscar producer breaking his silence in that shocking moment. He says police were ready to arrest Will Smith for attacking Chris Rock on stage. Why, he says, Smith wasn't removed. And our series, The Fleecing of America, the surge in telemedicine fraud during the pandemic. How one phone call can lead to thousands in surprise bills.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. 37 days into Russia's invasion, it appears Ukraine has turned the tables, crossing the border to attack inside Russian territory. Ukrainian helicopters striking a Russian fuel facility. Whether it was a daring one-off or a major change in strategy, it got the attention of the Russians and the world. Tonight, however, misery's center of gravity weighs squarely on the shattered and tortured port city of Mariupol. Today, yet another attempt to bring in aid and bring out trapped civilians ended in mostly crushing disappointment. According to local officials, a Russian blockade prevented an aid convoy from reaching the city. Mariupol, the most glaring symbol of Russia's ruthlessness, but not the only, as we found in villages surrounding the eastern city of Kharkiv. It's where Richard Engel is tonight.
Russian officials say Ukraine took the war to Russia, launching a cross-border attack with 2 combat helicopters. This video appears to show their tracer rounds destroying a fuel depot 20 miles from the Ukrainian border. A senior U.S. defense official tells NBC News that Ukraine was responsible for the daring raid, Ukraine's first of the war. But Ukraine's official response seemed deliberately ambiguous, with defense officials saying they couldn't confirm or deny involvement. The Kremlin tonight criticizing the strike on the Russian facility, saying it could harm ongoing peace talks. But the attack pales in comparison to what Russia has done just 45 miles away across the border in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, where Russian artillery and rockets have destroyed hundreds of buildings, and as we saw today, flattened nearby towns. In some areas, not leaving a single home standing. At the hospital in Chehuyev, Yevgeny, a farm worker, was taking a break with a friend when he heard that dreaded whistle and a Russian bomb exploded next to him. His friend was killed. Down the hall, Elena, 20 years old, who works the register at a supermarket, was shot when Russian troops opened fire on a bus full of civilian passengers. She says 8 people were killed and that the Russians went through their pockets and bags and stole their money. Across Chernihiv, Ukrainian troops were picking up the pieces of Russian bombs that are now all over town. But today it was Ukraine that sent a message to Russia that it too can reach across the border.
Richard, given this is the first raid we've seen inside Russia, what kind of Russian response might we expect?
Well, I think we're likely going to see a military response, but you'll notice that the Kremlin's public response has been somewhat muted because this is embarrassing for Russia that a Ukrainian helicopter was able to take off from this country, fly low, cross the Russian border, travel 20 miles, carry out an attack, and return safely to this country without so much as being shot at. It shows a different kind of Ukrainian capability.
Richard Engel in eastern Ukraine, thank you for that. One of the strangest chapters of this war, the abrupt departure of Russian troops from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant amid more reports that they may have been exposed to radiation. Gabe Gutierrez now with that story.
It's the site of one of the world's most terrifying disasters, leaving towns poisoned and abandoned. Now another debacle. Ukrainian authorities say Russian soldiers have left the Chernobyl nuclear power plant after suffering acute radiation sickness.
We have seen a spike in radiation. It is very likely due to the transport of heavy military equipment. So that gives you an indication that these troops do not know what they're doing and behaving recklessly.
Employees inside the plant had worked at gunpoint, Ukrainian authorities say, after Russian forces seized control 5 weeks ago. The agency in charge of the country's nuclear power stations now says the Russian soldiers fled towards Ukraine's border with Belarus, leaving in phases starting Tuesday. It also claims the Russians had dug trenches in the Red Forest, long considered Chernobyl's most polluted area, where thousands of pine trees turned red during the 1986 nuclear disaster. A local mayor says the Russians also took Ukrainian National Guardsmen with them as prisoners. NBC News can't independently verify those claims. The Kremlin has not commented, but earlier this week said it was scaling back military action in the area to focus elsewhere.
They clearly didn't bring any specialists with them who have experience with nuclear power plants, with nuclear facilities, with radiation. They had no concern for their own personnel, their own soldiers.
Ukrainian authorities say that before Russian soldiers left Chernobyl, they stole computers and even coffee makers from the plant, as well as looted a nearby hotel. Lester?
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. Another major part of this war, the exodus of refugees. More than 4 million Ukrainians have made their way to neighboring countries. Tonight, how some are adjusting to everyday life in exile in Poland. Dasha Burns is there.
This has long been a city of survival. Krakow, Poland's storied architecture was spared the Nazis' bombs in World War II. Now it's a city full of survivors, refugees fleeing today's war.
I think that my life just stopped at the moment the war started.
Irina Pavlicek was a corporate attorney in Lviv. Now in Krakow, her days are spent with laundry, online homework, and waiting inside this Catholic seminary where she's living with her 2 kids.
How does it feel to have your life change so dramatically, so quickly?
You just start to realize that the most important thing is safety.
Like nearly everyone we've met, her goal is to go home to Ukraine rather than grow roots here in Poland. But down the hall, Lubov Sidanich's family has had to settle in a bit more. The war interrupted her mother's cancer treatment. In Poland, she's able to get care again. We are praying for her health, Lubov says, and for our family left behind in Ukraine. For Lubov's kids, school now means Polish PE classes, new friends, and a new language. Both families know that what comes next is finding a job and a more permanent home.
I should start looking for a job just to feed my kids and myself. I don't know.
You're not ready to build a life outside of Ukraine?
We are not ready because we left all our life there in Ukraine.
Starting a new life here, making the loss of home all the more final. Dasha Burns, NBC News, Krakow, Poland.
Back here in the U.S., more good news on the jobs front for a
communities attended today's Vatican audience. The Pope called the Church's behavior deplorable and
Penso
begged
che ci sono
forgiveness.
altri.
Provo vergogna, dolore e vergogna.
I feel shame, sorrow and shame, for the role that different Catholics, in particular those with educational responsibilities, had in all that hurt you with abuses and lack of respect towards your identity, your culture, and even your spiritual values.
Canadian officials have admitted rampant physical and sexual abuse at the schools, and last year hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered. The Pope said today he hopes to visit Canada in July to apologize in person to survivors. In Yemen, a Saudi Arabian coalition and Houthi rebels backed by Iran have agreed to a 2-month truce. A United Nations envoy says that it will begin tomorrow and allow for shipments of fuel and some flights into Yemen. The war began in 2014, but past attempts at ceasefires have failed to hold. Sri Lanka was rocked overnight by mass protests amid its worst economic crisis in memory. Hundreds stormed past barricades near the president's home and set fire to a bus. Police fired tear gas and a water cannon. Dozens of people were hurt and dozens more arrested. The Indian Ocean nation has staggered under huge debt and fuel shortages. The Taliban have released 2 detainees, an American and a U.S. green card holder in Afghanistan. The U.S. State Department said today that they are in Qatar awaiting travel home. The release came as the Taliban have been pressing for outside humanitarian aid and economic assistance. Back in this country, there's word that White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki will leave this spring to work for MSNBC cable news. Psaki declined to confirm reports of her plans today, but she faced questions about representing the White House while negotiating a job in journalism.
There are a range of stringent ethical and legal requirements that are imposed on everybody in this administration and many administrations past about any conversations you're having with future employers. That is true of any industry you're working in, and I have abided by those and tried to take steps to go beyond that as well.
Psaki took the press secretary job in January of 2021 and said then that she wanted to stay just a year. The U.S. Transportation Department is reimposing tougher fuel economy standards for new vehicles. They will have to average at least 40 miles per gallon by 2026. That's up from 24 miles a gallon now. The change reverses President Trump's rollback of higher standards. Meanwhile, Ford and General Motors say that they will recall some 1.4 million vehicles. GM says the 2014 and 2015 Chevrolet Equinox and GMC Terrains may have faulty windshield wipers. Ford's recall covers possible oil leaks in the 2020 to 2022 Escape and Bronco Sport. It also includes pickup and SUV models with trailer brakes that may fail. For the first time, workers at an Amazon site have voted to unionize. Pro-union forces at an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, New York, won 55% of the vote. At the same time, Amazon workers in Bessemer, Alabama, appeared to reject a union, but that outcome is subject to a review of more than 400 disputed ballots. And on Wall Street, stocks finished the week with modest gains. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 140 points to close at 34,818. The Nasdaq rose 41 points. The S&P 500 added 15. Still to come on the NewsHour, another strong jobs report shows the American economy gaining steam. The Biden administration decides to end a controversial Trump
attempts. You've survived.
I don't know.
But there have been some.
There are things which is difficult for me to count. My intelligence says there were such attempts, and we saw information about some arrivals, planes. There were other details, but listen, I'm alive, I'm not wounded, I'm intact. So it's hard for me to talk about this. So many people have died in our country.
Seth, how much does Putin want Zelenskyy dead as part of this? How crucial is that aim?
Well, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I think Zelenskyy has been incredibly effective as a communicator for Ukraine to the rest of the world. He has been a major reason why the United States, the Germans, the British have continued to provide weapons to his country. He has, and so it's a big motor. So in that sense, I think the Russians would kill him if they could. The Russians have used units like the main intelligence directorate's GRU to kill defectors in the United Kingdom. So I don't think they'd hesitate to do that. The downside, and I think this is something Putin would have to think through as well, is it would also be an additional rallying cry for the West to support Ukraine, with Zelensky now the hero martyr, if that's what were to happen. But I think in general, I suspect Putin would rather have him dead than alive.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Aaron.
And next, Russian troops were possibly exposed to significant doses of radiation at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So we're going to tell you how it happened and what it could mean for these young soldiers. Plus, a former Russian official who worked for Putin now says Putin's days are numbered. Plus, the breaking news, Will Smith just releasing a statement about his future with the Academy after he slapped Chris Rock.
He was like, no, I'm fine. After the shocking attack, the Academy says Smith was asked to leave the ceremony but refused. Packer tells ABC News Smith, who was seated in the front row, was ultimately allowed to stay because Packer thought Rock didn't want to make a bad situation worse. They were about to physically remove Will Smith, and I had not been a part of those conversations. And so I immediately went to the Academy leadership that was on site, and I said, Chris Rock doesn't want that. While Smith later apologized to Rock on social media, he has not responded to our request for comment. Packer says Rock saved the show. Because Chris handled the moment with such grace and aplomb, it allowed the show to continue.
With Will Smith still facing possible sanctions from the Academy, this Hollywood drama is far from over. Lester?
Miguel Almaguer, thank you. Up next, an explosion of telemedicine fraud and how to protect yourself in our investigative series, The Fleecing of America.
Rain, light snow in northeastern South Dakota, but here's where it's turning into being a little more interesting. In north central South Dakota, you see some flashes of lightning there on First Alert Live Doppler radar, and that's drifting to the south and east. So some rumbles of thunder for you, but nothing severe expected to be happening, so that's some good news. And so we're kind of just getting teased with some of this rainfall. It's not really going to be amounting to that much. As far as temperatures go, 30s and 40s for the most part, although Yankton's at 52 degrees right now. We're 48 Sioux Falls, 39 Huron, and the wind, for the most part, not all that strong until you get up here to the north central, northwestern portions of South Dakota, a little breezy there. As we head into the nighttime hours, that wind will be dying down everywhere, and heading into tomorrow, the wind's really not going to be much of a factor at all. It's going to turn into a pretty nice day, a nice start to the weekend, as the wind's not going to be very strong. So again, here's Futurecast now. That light rain and snow in the east moving away, and then those spotty showers and thunder showers in central South Dakota, not much left of that by 10 o'clock. As we head into tomorrow morning, it looks like we're going to be precip free with temperatures in the 30s, and we'll take you into the afternoon, a lot of sunshine, and then into the afternoon it's going to be warmer. Again, it's going to be a nice day with most of us in the 50s. Let's take you into Saturday night and Sunday now. There are going to be a few spotty rain or snow showers in northeastern South Dakota 7 o'clock in the morning. A little better chance for some precip right along that North Dakota state line at noon, and then that track, some of that track to the southeast. Rain-snow mix in northeastern South Dakota. You may end up with an inch or two in extreme northeastern portions of South Dakota. Marshall.
Best when we work together as a team.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Get ahead of this caravan busting through barricades in Mexico heading straight north?
It has nothing to do with what I think or what I know. I know this administration is doing absolutely nothing to protect the borders, to protect our...
Effect was diarrhea. Tell your doctor about all the medicines and supplements.
Restricting the right to vote, severely undermining access to the ballot. Doesn't that undermine the case that you need to make and that the president needs to make about democracy, about American democracy?
Well, it's not new that there will be attacks on our democratic systems from within. That's not new. the point has to be, what are we doing to stand up against that, right? And so we have been attempting, for example, in Congress to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act passed, the Freedom to Vote Act passed. We need to get those passed because after 2013 in Shelby v. Holder, when the Voting Rights Act was gutted, essentially, we need to put back in place those protections. We're going to continue to work on what we need to do to fight back against what's happening in those states, including supporting all of the folks at the local level who in many other states are actually strengthening the right to vote. Essentially, what's at issue, and I think it's plain as day to see, is that people, again, in record numbers voted in 2020, and that scared some folks. So now they are in the process of trying to put in place laws around in various states in our country to make it more difficult to vote, with the expectation and intention that if you make it more difficult to vote, certain people won't vote. I think that folks know when they stood in those lines in 2020 for hours, when that single mother or father put those kids in the back seat and then drove to drop that ballot off in the drop box, they went and voted because they said, I want certain things. I want an extension of the child tax credit, and they got it. They said, I want to see money go to HBCUs, and they got it. They said, I want to see that we're going to have a real commitment to having broadband and high-speed internet for all communities, including rural communities. That is going to be affordable, including in urban communities. They got that. They said they want to have an administration that fights for affordable child care so that nobody should pay more than 7% of their income in child care. We're fighting for that. I think the people in 2020 made an order. They put in their order when they voted and said, these are the things they want. And they got those things. And then in the next election, they're going to know that when they vote, that vote matters and it produces results based on what they dictate.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is NBC News polling and others showing a disconnect between the performance of the economy and, as you said, you know, the actual substance of what has been passed and what American voters have received, and people's contentment, including with the administration. There is an enthusiasm gap that's north of 10-12%. Republicans are more enthusiastic than Democrats, and when you dig down into those numbers, it's because many in the Democratic base don't feel that they've gotten what they voted for, what they were promised by the Biden-Harris campaign. Now that it is the Biden-Harris administration, one of the reasons for that is that Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Kyrsten Sinema have stood in the way of extending the child tax credit, have stood in the way of increasing the minimum wage, have stood in the way of many of the, you know, the Build Back Better bill, have stood in the way of passing voting rights. Are Senators Manchin and Sinema, in the view of the White House, are they allies of this administration or are they opponents?
Not one Republican voted for the American Rescue Plan, which brought $1,400 checks to people when they needed it most, when we had millions of people out of work through no fault of their own. Not one voted when we were extending the child tax credit. And working parents know what that meant and what it means in terms of helping them get through the days and the month and satisfy their basic responsibilities to parent their children. When we look at what we achieved in terms of putting in place a system around getting vaccines for people, so now over 200, I think it's 15 million people have been vaccinated in our country, and as a result, we've been able to reopen our schools. 99% of them are reopened. Businesses are reopening. These are the achievements that were made possible in spite of the fact that not one Republican in so many of these policies voted. So I'm not going to get caught up in kind of an internal firing squad when you got to look at the fact that if we're talking about party politics, you've got a system where you also have an entire group of people who I believe have diverse interests and needs, but are for some reason falling in line behind a party instead of behind a policy that actually is in the best interest of their constituents.
Let's do a quick lightning round.
Okay.
Let's talk about Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
I don't do lightning rounds. I'm just telling you. But because it's not that simple for me ever. So before you ask any question, know that.
Absolutely. And I don't mind that at all. I don't mind that at all. I'm looking at the clock for the person who is minding the clock behind you, but
certainly think that the court needs to take a critical look at its rules around ethics, and that relates to a series of issues that have come up over the years. Yeah.
We all sat and watched the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings, in which she very calmly sat through what I think a lot of, particularly black women, let's just be honest, felt was brazen disrespect from senators like Lindsey Graham, senators like Tom Cotton, senators like Josh Hawley. What did you think when you watched that hearing?
I will tell you, Joy, I experienced great joy when I watched this brilliant, phenomenal black woman, jurist, be so smart and just cut through the political gamesmanship that they were attempting to incite. And she just was composed. And as far as I'm concerned, was taking a whole lot of people to school. And I watched that with incredible joy. Because it was just brilliance being displayed for the entire country to see. And I cannot wait to see. That will only be matched by the joy that I experience when I see her take the oath to be the next justice on the United States Supreme Court.
Vice President Harris, thank you so much.
Joy, it's good to be with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests to discuss my interview with the Vice President. We'll be right back.
Ear Mini, available exclusively.
Indeed, Impartial needs a Trump voice who still supports the MAGA movement?
Well, I think one of the things that people say is maybe hire journalists instead. And, you know, I know that's ironic for me to say as someone who makes partisan claims. But at the same time, I think that people who go to CBS rather than some of the cable networks are looking for objective analysis.
Right, but each one
You're
of
not going to get any objectivity from Mick Mulvaney. And in particular, I do think that this has to do with some of the things that are happening right now, particularly with Ukraine and some of the things Mick Mulvaney said in terms of extorting Zelensky, you know, under the Trump administration and being proud of that. And also some of the things he said.
It goes back to he's not being hired as a journalist, he's being hired as a commentator, as is Jen Psaki, who, interestingly enough, is very interested in the cable news paycheck, perhaps not necessarily sure of the future of cable news. Take a listen.
Cable news is dying.
significantly higher numbers. What are they expecting, and can this system handle it?
DHS officials held a briefing for reporters this week and told us that they're anticipating as many as 18,000 people crossing per day. That is their worst case scenario. But that would be more than double than the roughly 7,000 that they are taking into custody now. At that level, at the current existing levels, they're already overwhelmed in several border patrol sectors. So if they were to go to some of those projections, they would once more be in a situation where they would be forced to quickly release many of the people that are coming across the border simply because they don't have anywhere to hold them, they can't process them fast enough, and they certainly can't return them to their home countries quickly enough.
Nick, in the minute or so we have left, what about the politics of all this? Immigration is a hot-button political issue. We've already seen Republicans come out and speak about this. Do we expect to hear more about this, especially leading up to the midterms?
You can definitely expect we will hear a lot about this. This is going to become the subject probably of very many campaign ads heading into the midterms. And there's a great deal of potential peril and liability for the Democratic Party as well as the president. That's one of the reasons we saw some of the border state Democrats and centrist Democrats come out fairly strongly warning the White House not to do this, asking to keep the Title 42 restrictions in place. And keep an eye on Arizona in particular, where Senator Mark Kelly is likely to face a tough race, and he's been one of the voices out there telling Biden not to make this move.
That is Nick Miroff of the Washington Post joining us tonight. Nick, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
DAKOTA and Scott Engen caught up with the band to find out more about what the opportunity is meaning to them. It's something you'll only see right here on Dakota News Now.
South Dakota rock band ZELENSKYY is getting the opportunity of a lifetime next week. They'll be performing an original song on NBC's American Song Contest. And that's not all the band's been up to lately. They partnered with Remedy Brewing Company here in Sioux Falls for the second year in a row.
ZELENSKYY has become a household name throughout the state, and now the Black Hills-based group is getting a chance to vault into the national spotlight.
We're just super excited. It's going to be our biggest performance yet.
The American Song Contest pits all 50 states against each other in a competition to see which one has the best songwriter. ZELENSKYY has been chosen to represent South Dakota.
And when we found out, it was unreal. We couldn't believe it.
The band cut a new track just for the show and is excited to test their skills.
Being able to just share something that we've created on our own is pretty awesome to be able to show that to the country.
Outside of music, a second passion of theirs is craft beer, which has led to a relationship with Remedy Brewing Company.
Now they're starting to blow up, and we're getting really, really excited to see what these guys can do. We believed in them from day one, and we hope they can really, really push themselves.
Remedy is sponsoring the band for the second straight year, and the two have collaborated to create an IPA called Goose Juice.
It's just a good combination. Beer and music go together so well.
Now, with the whole nation watching, Goose plans to make Remedy and South Dakota proud.
It doesn't even seem real, we're just treating it like it's another show. We're not gonna make it too big for ourselves, and we don't want to get psyched out or anything
Vladimir, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And next, Russia turning its firepower on another key port city tonight, raising fears that it could face the same fate as other cities that have been leveled by Russia. Plus, the breaking news, Will Smith just resigning from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences. And he has more to say about his assault on Chris Rock.
People with moderate
Fighting is back at the Premier Center. PBR will be running all weekend long with riders from both near and far.
And the Russians have been hit by an air attack since World War II. This was video from a couple of days ago. The Ukrainians hit an ammo depot, and the explosions are then kicking off afterwards. It's a big fireworks display with the secondary explosions. Belgrade is helping supply the Russian forces, not only that are trying to take Kharkiv here, but also all of the forces that are trying to push out here towards Kyiv. And it has been an incredibly bloody set of weeks for the Russians. The Ukrainians are actually able to hit the Russian supply lines in a way that the Russians are not able to hit the Ukrainians. All of these units now here, both on the west and the east of Kyiv, had to withdraw or certainly are at a stalemate. Meanwhile, from Poland, all of the NATO supplies are still coming in almost unchecked. The Russians have yet to be able to hit any of those convoys. There will not be an attack, it looks like, here on Odessa. The Ukrainians hold that. Why? Because the Ukrainians were able to cut off the Russian supply lines at Kherson. Move in here now to another map. This is a little bit tighter of Kyiv. We can show you that the Russians have been pushed back here 20 or 30 miles. This area is all contested. There is about 700 tanks and armored personnel carriers that have been pulled out of Kyiv in the surrounding area by the Russians. The Ukrainians have taken back Irpin, a number of the other suburbs, and they also now are very close to holding a key airport here that the Russians have been trying to use. And the Russian supply lines are a complete mess, and you then have all the battlefield setbacks that the Ukrainians have had as well. With that, we bring in Ambassador John Bolton, former ambassador to the United Nations, also national security advisor under President Trump. You've got the battlefield setbacks. You'd think that would really be hurting Vladimir Putin. Quite the opposite. Putin's approval number, 71% in February. The New York Times reports it is now up to 83% in March. Ambassador, how's that possible?
Well, I think it's because far too often President Biden and other Western leaders have portrayed this invasion of Ukraine as Putin's war. Now, obviously, Putin, as president of Russia, made the final decisions. But this is not his effort alone. He reflects a very broad segment of Russia that believes that Ukraine and Belarus, while we're on the subject, are part of Mother Russia, part of the Rodinia, and they want them back. So what Putin has said for years, this goes back before his first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, that the effort to split Ukraine and the other former Soviet republics away from Russia is a Western plot against the Russian people. And I think that's having an effect. I think Putin's propaganda is having an effect. And, you know, we're not surprised in this country when there's a rally round the president feeling when the country is in military hostilities. I think that's happening in Russia, too. So we shouldn't underestimate the depth of feeling here or the value that Putin and his advisors place on getting control of Ukraine.
Yeah, and certainly for a big part of the Russian population, they are used to suffering in the name of the greater Soviet good. It happened throughout the whole Cold War. The hope was that these sanctions would crush the ruble and crush the Russian economy in a way that the street would rise up and that there would be these massive protests and on and on. The ruble, however, is back to where it was when Russia invaded Ukraine. It almost sort of defies logic. It certainly defies everything that the State Department and the Treasury Department thought was going to happen.
Well, I can say I'm a very strong proponent of economic sanctions, and I applaud every sanction we've applied on Russia, but we have not done nearly enough. In my experience, we've applied strict sanctions on North Korea, on Iran, on Venezuela under Maduro, on Turkey under Erdogan. All those regimes are still in power. it's because we don't go far enough. And I think this is a big problem in this current crisis. You know, the French and the Germans are already talking about finding ways to negotiate an end to the fighting so they can go back to business as usual. The alliance is not as united as Biden says, and the Russians know that.
The Russians know it. They're trying to exploit it. You've been in government long enough to sort of have this historical view. It's one of the reasons we're so grateful that you're here. 1994 Budapest Memorandum, U.S., Russia, and Britain committed to respect independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. In return, Ukraine gave up all of its nuclear warheads. We wouldn't be here if Kyiv had kept its nuclear warheads. Now, part of the ceasefire agreement that the Russians and the Germans and the Brits are talking about would have security guarantees by the U.S. and the U.K. Why would the Ukrainians accept those?
Well, I think they'd be crazy to do that and think that it would get them real security. Biden has not been willing and was not willing before it turned into actual combat to do what was necessary to deter Putin. That's the best security guarantee. And the best security guarantee in the world for the last 70-plus years has been NATO membership, which George W. Bush tried to get for Ukraine and Georgia on an expedited basis going back to 2008. The French and the Germans rejected it. So this is looking for a negotiated way out here. I don't think has much traction. I don't think Putin can afford to do it, given the military reverses you detailed a minute ago. And I don't think Zelensky can either. I think the Ukrainians are fighting well. They want their independence. And for him to do what would be necessary to get a deal with Russia would mean giving up territory. I don't think he's willing to do it, and I don't think he should give it up. But I think we've got to do more. I say we, the United States, the West, all of us. Tougher economic sanctions, more military assistance.
You know, we've talked for a while that every day this goes on, it's almost like another week added to when it might end. I've only got about 20 or 30 seconds. Daily Mail, Putin is constantly followed by thyroid cancer doctor. Specialists have spent 282 days with Putin, claims he's seriously ill and suffering steroid rage from treatment. Is there any reason to believe any of these reports?
No, not particularly. Look, I don't think Putin has a screw loose. I think he's perfectly cold-blooded, rational. He may be wrong. He's made mistakes. But don't think he's isolated in this. This is not Putin's war. This is Russia's war.
Very well said. Ambassador, it's good to see you. Thanks as always. Have a great weekend, sir.
I don't think we've cornered the market on ego. Hey, it's, you know, it certainly is a problem. I think the sooner you realize there's something bigger than all of us, the easier it's going to be in your life. And as I say, hard jump to make for a lot of us, even me, and I kind of understand the process.
You understand it probably better than a lot of people with your career, and I was wondering if, you know, you had been the one that jumped up out of his seat and slapped Chris Rock, if you would have been treated the same way, Mel.
Hello, Jesse. Thank you. That's our time.
Have you ever thought about that?
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay.
That is our time.
Well, Mel, thank you very much for joining Jesse Waters Primetime, and we really appreciate it. April 13th, the movie drops, Father Stu. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Speaking of action stars, we have a couple of our own here at Fox News, starting with Emily Campagno. Check this out.
And Juanita, the other piece to it, and I was talking with, we were in this motorcade, and the lady who was driving us is from here. She's native to Greenville, Mississippi. And we were talking about the fact that people don't really come to places like this. You know, part of the issue with our politics is it's like 16 state politics. It's just swing states. So it's 2022, so everybody goes to Michigan, everybody goes to Pennsylvania, and everybody goes, you know, to Wisconsin. Nobody comes to Mississippi, but there are so many needs out here. And there are so many things that Democrats could do that would actually rouse voters in places where you have low voter turnout, but high percentages of black voters and younger voters who, in theory, could create more swing states. What do you make of that? The fact that our politics is so limited that people don't come out and talk to folks like those in Greenville? Because I can tell you right now, the people here are excited just to have the Vice President of the United States here. We were seeing them on the side of the road waving. It was like a holiday, you know, because it's so unusual. Your thoughts?
Joy, I think the vice president addressed it in your interview too, because she said these people have needs and we're here to respond to those needs, whether it's high-speed internet access, whether it's capital for small businesses, and recognizing and responding to that in a 50-state approach, I think is what Democrats should be doing more of. And we saw the benefits of that pay dividends just in Georgia in the 2021 Senate runoffs, where you have Democrats now taking control of the Senate to be able to advance the confirmation of someone like Judge Ketanji Brown, to be able to consider other pieces of legislation within the Biden agenda. And that, I think, is the proof that Democrats have that intention and should be expanding it more, because it can pay dividends in states like Mississippi, where there is this energy, where there are larger Black populations that, let's be real, have been marginalized and excluded for decades and decades and decades, just waiting to be addressed, waiting to have their needs met so that they can provide that same political power to the party. And I think the party is seeing that, again, after Georgia, and looking to advance that playbook in other states across the country.
You know, and Michael, you know, I know enough history. I'm not a historian like you, but I know enough history to know that Mississippi actually was one of the most successful states in Reconstruction, right? Because it was a majority Black state. Before the Great Migration, this was a majority Black state, and they were the first to elect Black people statewide after the Civil War. And, you know, Mississippi was a swing state in 1980. That's why Ronald Reagan came down here and did that horrific speech where he did his states' rights thing. When did we get to the point? Absolutely. When did we get to the point, and how did we get to the point where politics became limited to like 15, 16 states?
A lot of it had to do with the fact that Republicans embraced racists and white supremacists. As you well know, before 1960, the Republicans had a better record on civil rights than the Democrats did, because the Democrats were a largely Southern white party. The state in 1960 that went to John Kennedy by the biggest margin, you may know this, was the state that Juanita just mentioned. It was Georgia, by about something like 65%. And that was not Black people saying we're for Kennedy for civil rights. That was a state in which many Black people could not vote. The majority could not. These were white voters saying to Kennedy, we expect you to behave like Franklin Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, other Democrats who stood against civil rights. That was pretty recent. 1964, Barry Goldwater said he thought the Civil Rights Act, as you well know, Joy, was unconstitutional. And ever since then, in ways subtle and in recent years not so subtle, Republicans, especially in the South, have sent the message that if racism lurks in your heart, and if you're afraid of Black people and others who might gain more influence in the country as their numbers rise and their influence rises, we're the party that will keep that from happening. Used to be said quietly, it's now said out loud. Look at 1964, and you're right about contrast the Reconstruction, when Black people voted for Black senators and other Black office holders before the middle of the 1870s. In 1964, Mississippi went for Barry Goldwater over Lyndon Johnson, the author of the Civil Rights Act, by something like 85% to 15. This was not even a close race. This was 85%. It's like an election in Nazi Germany or in Russia.
Yeah, and we still have a United States senator who said that he would have, had he been around then, opposed the Civil Rights Act. His name is Rand Paul, who is up for re-election against an African-American challenger. And people in the Democratic Party, Juanita, will write that off and say, well, that's Kentucky, that's a red state. But you have somebody who is on the record of saying he would have been against the Civil Rights Act, running against a movement candidate. And, you know, in the case of Charles Booker, and I wonder if we're just, I think we're out of time, but very quickly, is that a problem for the party? Do they need to start looking at those races and saying those are possible too?
It's absolutely a problem, and I think the Democratic Party needs to give Charles Booker the same energy they gave Amy McGrath and do some major investments in the state of Kentucky so it can pay dividends in the long run.
Amen. Everybody is going to stick around because we love this panel, and they're going to stick around to play Who Won the Week. That is next. Don't miss it.
Producer Will Packer says in a new interview with ABC's Good Morning America that he thought so too.
I thought it was a bit. I thought it was a bit like everybody else. Once I saw Will yelling at the stage with such vitriol, my heart dropped.
Packer says he rushed over to Rock as he exited the stage.
I said, did he really hit you?
And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. He goes, I just took a punch from Muhammad Ali, as only Chris can. He was immediately, you know, in joke mode, but you could tell that he was very much still in shock.
Smith played the boxer in the 2001 film Ali. CNN has obtained new video from a seat filler inside the Oscars, showing a new angle of the incident, this time filmed from behind Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. Packer says that Los Angeles police were prepared to arrest Smith that night.
And they were saying, this is battery, we will go get him. You can press charges, we can arrest him. As they were talking, Chris was, he was being very dismissive of those options. He was like, no, I'm fine.
The Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences released a statement earlier this week stating that they asked Smith to leave and he refused. A source telling CNN that Academy leaders had told Smith's publicists to deliver the message to the actor. Now Packer is saying Chris Rock did not want Smith removed from the show.
They were about to physically remove Will Smith. I said, Rock has made it clear that he does not want to make a bad situation worse.
Packer praised Rock for how he handled the situation.
Did he save the show that night?
I think he did. I think he did. He certainly saved what was left of it at that point. Chris handled the moment with such grace and aplomb.
Rock told fans during his stand-up show in Boston this week that he's still processing what happened. Thursday, he faced a heckler who yelled F Will Smith. According to People, Rock repeatedly told the audience member no.
It's just, just this whole story has developed is so bizarre, Chloe. So what does this resignation mean?
Right, okay, this is what everybody wants to know. The resignation means that Will Smith can no longer vote as an Academy member. That means during awards season, he can't vote for upcoming winners. Now, this does not mean, though, that he cannot be nominated in the future. So we could see him potentially nominated for an Academy Award in the future. But also, they could ban him. We might find out on April 18th that he's banned from attending the Oscars indefinitely. But we're going to find out soon.
Oh, all right, and that obviously would be pretty significant if that were to occur. All right, thank you so much, Chloe. And next, a blockbuster jobs report. But we're going to tell you the one number that really stood out to us.
Your life. The IT, only on Dakota News Now.
Let's find out.
And friends of the News Hour.
Or the freedom to walk away.
Is Elmo the correct answer?
She never rhymes.
Elmo loves to learn about it all, the things that are big and the things that are small.
It was a close
we
call.
both
though.
said it's because she doesn't ever rhyme.
And she would never go near an elephant.
Okay.
That's the point.
I mean, right now, Louisville has 20 in the paint, and they're playing downhill. They are attacking the paint multiple ways, and they're doing it to collect.
An eye drop that may help you see up close. I did.
I think we need a bit more specificity to the Kremlin about what type of strong response we would make. We don't have to tell them precisely what it is. It's good to keep them guessing. But they need to see that, in fact, there will be a strong response. That is the message we need to send. And I'm not sure we're sending it yet.
Super, thank you. Ilya, did you have any comments, any responses to General Breedlove on the Ukrainian military and how it's changed? Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I would say that probably the most critical change, positive change that we were surprised about is the the leadership, because in many ways we were super lucky to get this couple of top general Zaluzhny and also Defense Minister Reznikov, and they, as you know, they have been appointed just months before the big war, and they ended up being like a very strong couple with a lot of chemistry, and because of this chemistry, because of their tandem between this general and the civilian minister, we have many of processes in the military, in the defense ministry, running and resuming, because the previous pair of defense minister and the top commander were in actual conflict, and I thank God for having different officials on these positions. So in many ways, it is also about the degeneration of generals, the younger generation of generals who were like grassroots. So for instance, General Zelenskyy, he has become a general and military commander in the past. He's an actual battlefield general, not a military bureaucrat in kind of fatigues. So that is very important. I think that's often overlooked in the Western media in terms of the Ukrainian progress, and even we are surprised at this progress. This very strong leadership and very wise leadership.
Thanks, Celia. I think that's a really important point. I'm not your editor, but if I were your editor, I would ask you to write a story about General Zelenskyy and also Reznikov. They're not very well known here, and every time I get a chance to talk to Ukrainians, we just had a delegation come in to Washington.
From North Bend. The U.S. economy added another 431,000 jobs in March. Now, that brings the unemployment rate to 3.6%, which is a pandemic-era low. But there was one number that actually...
You are. If I was a betting man, I would say no. But I like to hope he had an inkling.
I'm scared. In a good way. I'm lying.
Greg's assistant for a day.
Seeing Zelenskyy in Ukraine now know what democracy means.
Yeah.
A lot who are on the fence may see things a little different.
Amen. I cannot beat that. This is going to be the rare occasion where I'm going to let this wonderful panel win. All of you won the week. Thank you so much for being with me for this wonderful, very special show. Juanita Tolliver, Kurt Bardella, Michael Beschloss, all of you won the week. That is tonight's readout. All In with Chris Hayes starts right now.
Tonight on All In.
Do you agree with members of your caucus who are saying that Clarence Thomas should resign?
I don't think he should have ever been appointed.
The wife of a Supreme Court justice wrapped up in Donald Trump's coup attempt. Tonight, new reporting on the influence Ginny Thomas peddled inside the White House as her husband ruled on Trump cases. Then, from Ukrainian soldiers liberating a Ukrainian town to Ukrainian attack inside Russia. What we know about who is actually winning this war. Plus, why the intra-party fight over Madison Cawthorn's cocaine orgy claims won't die.
I can tell you that Madison Cawthorn told me yesterday that he had not retracted what he said.
And inside one of the biggest labor victories in decades as Amazon workers in New York vote to unionize. But All In starts right now.
Putin's fine. The ruble has almost completely recovered since the day Russia invaded. So much for destroying the Russian economy and getting the Russian military to withdraw from Ukraine. And yet, we in the U.S. are paying higher and higher gas prices thanks to these sanctions.
Of the Delphi murders,
There's a lot of pieces around the periphery that they're still looking for that one that goes in the middle.
including another young girl who says she also had an encounter with an accused predator. NewsNation Prime starts.
New satellite photos from Maxar Technologies tonight confirm a Pentagon estimation that the Russian military has likely left an airport outside Kyiv. The capture of this airport back in February was one of the first big victories of the war by the Russians. These images come to us a day after the mayor of a town, also outside the capital, says they have been liberated from the Russians. Still, we can't stress enough that the Russian missile strikes continue to exact a deadly toll here. One official in the northern city of Chernihiv told me a hospital there was hit and the people are suffering.
We have no electricity, no water. The Russian forces just shelled a local regional hospital.
That was the mayor of Chernihiv. This is new video from that area that shows the sheer amount of destruction that occurred before Ukrainians were able to retake it. Also of concern tonight, the humanitarian crisis in the south of the country, with the Red Cross unable to get inside the besieged city of Mariupol and only a few thousand civilians able to get out today. As we do every night here on CNN, we have reporters across Ukraine as well as at the White House to bring us all the latest on these stories. We want to start with the humanitarian crisis and Ivan Watson. Ivan, the Ukrainian government says that about 771 people just from Mariupol arrived in Zaporizhzhia tonight. You were there when they arrived. What was that moment like?
Right. Well, it should have been, in normal times, maybe a 2.5-hour, 3-hour trip from the Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk to Zaporizhzhia, which is where I am, controlled by the Ukrainians. Instead, it took closer to 11, 12 hours for these people to get out, to get here. Many of these people had fled Mariupol, fled the siege there, and found that trying to get out of Russian-occupied territory is not an easy thing to do.
The Ukrainian authorities are here waiting, police checking the documents of the new arrivals. There is a war very much underway, a deadly war, and serious national security threats. After people are processed here, there is a major volunteer and city government effort to welcome the newly arrived evacuees and to give them temporary shelter, warm meals. People are tired. There are little kids who've been on this bus.
Certainly an urgent search, Ruta Bay, and I think
witnessed a modern-day siege and perhaps the destruction of their homes and explosions in just a terrible environment. Now, the International Committee of the Red Cross is trying to reach the city of Mariupol itself and failed, said it was not permitted to go through. There are still believed to be about 100,000 or more citizens, civilians of Mariupol still trapped there in the combat zone, as well as a force of Ukrainian troops that are still holding out against a vastly larger number of Russian military forces that have encircled the city and besieged it for weeks now. So while this is a glimmer of hope after many failed attempts to evacuate civilians, there is still a lot of work to be done to protect the people still trapped in the combat zone.
So where will these solar panels come from? Well, as it happens, they will come from China. We can be certain of that because the Chinese make more than 80% of all the world's solar panels, which is to say, all of them. So we're going to be even more reliant, far more reliant on Chinese manufacturing than we already are.
We don't want to go overboard in that regard, so all those things that got me to LifeSpring are still there. And I guess I struggle with not going overboard and fighting the cults, but I know that's important too.
Now, the year after that video was filmed, again, very self-aware, very compelling, raw, emotional testimony there. The year after that was filmed, Ginny married her current husband, Clarence Thomas. He was then the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now, Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court in 1991 to replace, of course, Justice Thurgood Marshall. He's now the longest-serving member of the court, and one could argue the most influential member of the court. Ginny Thomas continued to work in conservative politics for the Heritage Foundation during the George W. Bush administration, later founding a lobbying group. In 2020, Ginny Thomas made headlines of her own when Anita Hill revealed that Thomas had left her a voicemail asking for an apology. Now, for context, Hill accused Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment during his confirmation hearings, somewhat famously, back in 1991. So Ginny Thomas called Anita Hill asking for an apology nearly 20 years after the fact. And now you've likely seen Ginny Thomas's name in the news again. Again, not because she's the wife of Clarence Thomas, no, because the Washington Post obtained copies of messages that had been turned over to the January 6th committee, revealing that Ginny Thomas sent former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows a barrage of texts in the weeks after the 2020 election, urging him to try to overturn the results. She was pro-coup. She referred to wild far-right conspiracy theories, sending Meadows a link to an absolutely just insane YouTube video that's since been taken down, which was centered around a fake QAnon conspiracy theory referencing a Trump sting. The video was by a far-right commentator who also claimed that Sandy Hook massacre was a false flag. After she texted that video to Meadows, Thomas added, quote, "I hope this is true."